This podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Whether you love true crime or comedy, celebrity interviews or news, you call the shots on what's in your podcast queue. And guess what? Now you can call them on your auto insurance too, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive. It works just the way it sounds. You tell Progressive how much you want to pay for car insurance, and they'll show you coverage options that fit your budget. Get your quote today at progressive.com to join the over 28 million drivers who trust Progressive. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
The one thing I've always said, and the one thing I've said to my wife over all these years, and I said it then, I say it now, I'm only as good as my next idea. And to this day, I still worry about that. Like, am I delivering on my promises to provide good content, good education, a good community vibe?
Welcome back to Working. I'm your host, Isaac Butler.
And I'm your other host, June Thomas.
June, now that the Edinburgh Fringe Festival is over, have you finally gotten any sleep? Are you still hungover? What's going on over there?
I'm a very clean living girl. I would disappoint you in every direction. So yeah, I'm getting my 8, 9 every day. It's great.
Incredible. And who did you talk to today?
Isaac, this week I spoke with Brad Dowdy, who is known to those of us in the stationery fandom as the Pen Addict.
Wait. Let me just stop you right there. This guy makes his living reviewing pens?
Well, Isaac, as an improv comedian might say, yes and. Brad does indeed review pens on his blog, and he's been doing that for more than 15 years. But he also has a weekly podcast and a thrice weekly Twitch stream. And he's involved in designing and manufacturing pens, pencils, and other stationery products. And so, as a fellow pen addict, I know Brad and I'm a big fan of his work, but I mostly wanted to talk to him because, to me, he is a great representative of a new kind of independent creator. You know, in journalism, we have this established model of freelancing. And in the last few years, a new kind of content creator has blossomed thanks to the internet. They might be YouTubers or Twitch streamers. Many create classes or run cohort-based learning experiences. Brad feels to me like a really great example of someone who has stayed true to his intention, which is ultimately helping people find their next favorite pen. But he's also ultimately someone who makes his living from sharing about things he's into. And
speaking of sharing, for our Slate Plus listeners, will you be sharing a little something extra this week?
I sure will, Isaac. A couple of times in the interview, we talked about pen shows, and it struck me that people who've never stepped into that particular Shangri-La might not know what they're like. So I asked Brad to describe the pen show phenomenon, and I also asked him about some of the trends in the fountain pen market, that many of which reveal themselves at pen shows.
June, that sounds like the jewel-encrusted limited edition fountain pen of the podcasting universe. And if you are already a Slate Plus subscriber, that will be waiting for you at the end of this week's episode. If you're not already a Slate Plus subscriber, though, you could get that and so much more. We're talking bonus segments on shows like this one, bonus full episodes of shows like Big Mood, Little Mood, and Decoder Ring. We're talking full access behind the paywall at the mothership site of Slate. We're talking getting to feel virtuous for supporting everything we do right here on Working. Go to slate.com/working plus to sign up today. All right, now let's listen in on June's conversation with Brad Dowdy, aka the Pen Addict.
Brad Dowdy, the Pen Addict, welcome to Working.
Thank you for having me. This is unbelievable. It's great to talk to you.
So the first thing I would like you to do is list all the things that you do. What are the elements that fall under the Pen Addict portfolio?
I don't think I've ever been presented with it that way. So I write a blog called The Pen Addict. So I basically do pen reviews. That was the impetus for this whole, the Pen Addict empire, if you will, which is not really an empire. But so I have a blog where I write reviews. So myself and a few other people, we write reviews every week. I've been doing that since 2007. I started a podcast with my podcast partner, Mike Hurley, the Pen Addict podcast. That began in 2012. Shortly thereafter, I started a pen case company called Notco, which is no longer in its original form, but the name is still out there and the brand's still out there. I stream on Twitch. So I've been streaming on Twitch about stationery. Like all of these things are stationery related, pen related, paper, everything related to that. I've been doing that for about 6 years almost, I think. And I'm part of a pen company called Spoke Design, where we design, manufacture, assemble, and ship different types of pens and pencils. Did I cover it? I mean,
the only thing I think I had on my list that you didn't mention was the membership. So there's also like the membership of the Pen Addict, right?
Yeah, that's quite an important thing, to be honest. And I'm glad you said that, because I think of the Pen Addict blog as just kind of all this encompassing thing. But the Pen Addict membership is actually what allowed me to leave my job to do this full time. Like none of these individual things would be enough for me to do this for a living. But all of these things together, yeah, I've been able to make it work.
Yeah, and I have to say, Brad, that, you know, and I should also disclose that you and I know each other. I am a member of the Pen Addict. I'm a regular reader. I've been listening to the podcast for a decade, I guess.
I was going to say probably a decade would be my guess.
Yeah,
we've known each other.
I regularly tune in to the Twitch stream. So one of the things I'm curious about is how you keep track of all the things that you do. You know, how do you know what you'll be working on any given day?
So in listening to working, you know, quite frequently, I've heard you and Isaac talk about different types of scheduling and calendaring. And it seemed to me that you had have a certain derision for block scheduling. I don't know if I have that
no.
right.
Isaac, may I certainly do not.
So I set my week up essentially as block scheduling. Like I know you talk a lot about productivity and things like that here. And I'm not like a big productivity guru or anything like that. That's not my thing at all. But I basically, over the years, I figured out what works for me. And what works for me, having to juggle like all the different jobs I have that make up my one job, is having a reasonably fixed schedule throughout the week. And that's really through a 7-day week. I'm not saying I work 7 days, but I use all days of the week to accomplish certain tasks and certain goals, so that I have a picture going into the week, what needs to be done, what pens need to be reviewed, what articles need to be published, what, you know, is the podcast on its regular schedule, or do we have to adjust the schedule, you know, because we have different things going on, you know. And then I use the times around the fixed times that are the absolutely mandatory stuff that I have to get done to fill in, oh, I need to work on the reviews from 3 weeks from now, right? Yeah. So I have this time to write articles, to brainstorm the next projects that I'm working on. Like all the project time kind of fits itself in between the blocks throughout the day. So that's kind of how I manage my week in a general sense.
Yeah. Well, it's really striking to me how, I guess I keep talking about it as a portfolio, which feels appropriate. Like all of the different components of your world, it feels like it makes a kind of a good whole, because you have like, you're reviewing. Okay, that's the blog. You kind of keeping up with the news. That's the podcast and the Twitch streams. You get to kind of scratch your creativity itch with Spoke, which is your pen design company, with all those things. But what came first? You mentioned that you started a blog, but when you started it, did you have any sense at all that this was going to be something, A, that you'd be doing however many years later, but that it might, you know, become your entire kind of creative life in a way?
Yeah, not at all. Like I never set out to do this. And you know, the blog started in 2007, and at the time, I'm an IT guy, right? I had a really solid IT job. I was with the same company, what ended up being for 15 years total. So I was in the midst of that, and I've always had a passion for stationery ever since I was a kid. Like I always cared about what I wrote with or what I wrote on. And my impetus was I wanted products that allowed me to write small, right? I have a particular handwriting that's can be tiny, and it's a block print style. Like, I'm not a cursive writer. I'm not going to be on Instagram writing calligraphy for anybody, but I have a very clean, like almost architectural style handwriting.
Yeah.
And growing up, going to high school in the 80s and college in the 90s, you are very limited in access. And like, I wanted those things back then. Like, I remember trying to find those things back then, and you couldn't find that stuff. Most people who might listen to this are familiar. If they're not familiar with pens at all, you've probably used like a 0.7 millimeter gel ink pen or a 1.0 millimeter ballpoint pen. Those are the tip sizes, and that puts a fine line down on the page. Well, I'm looking for something like half of that, right? Yeah. Much more narrow. And it's not a common thing. Companies don't like to make those things. So I went on the internet and searched for it, and I couldn't find much information. And like a lot of creatives I'm sure you've talked to over the years, when you can't find the thing that you want, you make the thing that you want, right? Yeah. So what I wanted was more information on the pens that I wanted to buy, and I couldn't find it. And at the time, these pens were things I'm having to import from Japan and ordering from, tricky eBay stores and things like that. But I'm getting what I want. But I wanted to find more information. And I was very internet savvy, obviously being in IT. Yeah. So all I did was get a notebook and literally write down my thoughts on the page, handwritten, what I thought about this pen, took a picture of that, and posted it on my blog. Like, those were my first posts, were literally just a handwritten image. And then I would type up saying, hey, here's this pen. And, I thought it was pretty good. And here's the details. Well, and that escalated. You could say that escalated. Sure did. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, from your starting and, writing in what was a moleskin top-bound notebook, right?
The reporter. So the top just flipped up so you could hold it in your hand.
Yeah. So from there, we fast forward to how many years ago when you went full time as a creative person?
So it was January 1st, 2016. So I guess we're 7 years on now.
Okay.
7.5 years. So what happened was, like I said, the intent was the blog was to never, make a living from that. That wasn't even like a thought process at the time. It was just something fun to do as a hobby. And I started, the online community around stationery started to grow. We started to have some shops that were doing neat things in the space and importing the things that I wanted and making it easier for me to access and curating stuff that I could just go get. And, I'd end up making relationships with different companies and then I would end up getting advertising relationships with different companies. And then I would have pen shows out around the U.S. where someone would, pay for my travel to come to the show and work for them. Like, it was kind of, I got, like more exposure, Yeah.
You're an influencer, Brad. I mean, it's funny that we joke about that, but you really are. I mean, one of your roles that we didn't talk about at the top was you really are a kind of an educator, a hype guy, a consultant, and like a connector of people and you make connections.
Yeah, that's my favorite thing to do. Like in the end, like not to like jump all the way to the end. Like my favorite part of what I do is like sharing with people, educating, communicating, talking, all of that stuff that, there's stuff that pays the bills and then there's stuff that like, I want to help someone find their next favorite pen, right? Like it's as simple as that. But, I started getting opportunities to travel, getting opportunities to produce products. And it eventually got to a point where I was making some money, right? And I had my day job. I was making some money. And, I'm just for context, I'm married. I have 2 kids. My wife has, a stable job with insurance. So I'm definitely fortunate to, be allowed to take a risk. Like I wouldn't be in this situation without my wife. Yeah. So I got to the point where I was making half of what I made in my IT job and just doing this like on the side. I mean, it was a lot of work because I was
right. You were doing 2 jobs.
I was doing 2 jobs essentially at the time. So it was a huge pay cut when I left, but we decided that, the quality of life, the time with the family, all of those things would be important. And then I could actually work on these other things with the Pen Addict and continue to try to grow them. Yeah. I have never made as much again as when I left my IT job. Like I've never made that 100% worth of salary, but I've done really good. Like I have a solid base. It grows slowly, and I have reaped all the benefits of working for myself, making my own schedule, doing something I love. So yeah, there's all those benefits way outweigh any dollar amount.
So when you left your day job and you became a full-time pen addict, what were your concerns? What were you worried about? Because, you mentioned money, you mentioned, that, but I think probably that wasn't the big thing, right?
Absolutely not. No. Am I good enough? Totally the imposter syndrome. Will people be interested in what I have to say and be willing to pay a small amount of money for that? And to be, to get that support from people when you're asking them directly for money, right? It's just me. And the one thing I've always said, and the one thing I've said to my wife over all these years, and I said it then, I say it now, I'm only as good as my next idea. And to this day, I still worry about that. Like, am I doing the right thing? Am I doing right by my members, right? Or is someone spending $5 a month? Are they getting their value, right? Like that's the stuff that keeps me up at night, that I'm delivering on my promises to provide good content, a good time, right? Like fun is very important to me, good education, and just like a good community vibe.
Yeah. Well, I think, I guess it was Kevin Kelly who came up with that idea of, the 1,000 true fans, that's actually the way that as an individual you can make it. You can get to do your thing. Yes. And I think of you as being just an absolute prime example of that. Like, people want to support you. They're interested in,
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is definitely, back when I was making my decision, that is definitely a thought I had in my head, Kevin's, 1,000 True Fans idea. Because I'm also very, I guess, honest with myself, knowing that I'm not in a business that I'm ever going to have 10,000 true fans, right? This is not a blow up to the moon type of situation, but this is a very stable, high quality, great group of people. And if I can get that and just be a good steward for those people, like, everything else is golden.
We'll be back with more from June's conversation with Brad Dowdy after this.
At the end of your first year, Discover credit cards automatically double all the cash back you've earned. That's right. Everything you earned doubled. All the cash back from eating at your favorite soup dumpling restaurant doubled. All the cash back from that trip where you sort of learned to snowboard also doubled. And the best part, you don't have to do anything ridiculous to get it. Nope. Discover does it automatically. Seriously though, see terms and check it out for yourself at discover.com/match. This episode is brought to you by Bank of America. If you own or operate a business, whether it's a local operation or a global corporation, partnering with Bank of America could be your smartest move. By teaming with Bank of America, you'll enjoy exclusive digital tools, award-winning insights, and business solutions so powerful, you'll make every move matter. Position your business to capitalize on opportunity in a moment's notice. Visit bankofamerica.com/bankingforbusiness to learn more. What would you like the power to do? Bank of America, N.A., copyright 2023.
Hey listeners, Isaac Butler here. I just wanted to say, if you're enjoying this episode and you're thinking, what if I never wanted to miss an episode of Working? Well, guess what? You can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And if you already subscribe and you're thinking, what can I do to help these wonderful people find new listeners? Well, you can rate our show. You can review our show. You can give it 5 stars on the Apple app. You can check that little star on Overcast if that's your app of choice. And that really does help us spread the word. Thank you so much in advance. Now back to June's conversation with Brad Dowdy.
You mentioned earlier that you used to have a pen case company, I guess is a way of describing Notco.
Yeah. Yes.
And you kind of, you said it exists in a certain way, but you kind of sunset the company, wrapped up the company. And that feels really important to me, because I think one of the hardest things when you are being a freelancer, or however you want to describe that, is wrapping something up. You can't just keep adding things, but it's really hard to let go of something. So can you talk about how you decided to kind of bring that particular part of your portfolio to a close?
One of the needs I wanted to fill as someone newer in the industry was the carrying aspect of pens. We all like our pens, and traditionally, fountain pens were seen as an old, stodgy type of thing, and therefore they kind of had old, stodgy accessories. Well, as the pen started to advance to bring in a much more creative demographic, those type of people like myself were looking for different things to carry their stuff in. So what we did is we essentially made, if you think about it, if you don't know anything about pens, you think of it as a little backpack for your pens, right? We made
exactly.
Cordura nylon with zippers and fun colors, carrying cases for your pens. So it's one of the most proudest accomplishments I've ever made, starting that company, running that company, and honestly closing down that company. I'm proud of how it ended in a reasonably positive manner. So the mistakes I made along the way were not ending it soon enough, right? Being stubborn, knowing the writings on the wall, but not wanting to read the book, it's there, it's right in front of me, but it's I'm going to keep going and I'm going to make it work. Well, at some point you just don't have enough time or money to make it work. So the thing I'm most proud about is that when I finally turned everything off, we had zero debt. I didn't owe anybody or anything $1. And that's the sign of it was a good company. We didn't make it as far as hey, we're continuing to exist, but we did something cool that people liked. And in the end, I think I made some mistakes in trying to figure out inventory is hard, right? Trying to manage production is hard. So when it's just myself and one partner, my partner Jeff, who I love to death and is one of the great designers I've ever worked with, it just got to be too much, and it was just time to shut it down. But I'm happy with the way it closed down. And then, I've still been able to keep the name alive because we came up with some really great designs at the time, and I want to see them live on. So I've been able to work with some other companies to keep some of the collaborative efforts alive. Yeah.
Well, I just remember going to the DC Pen Show, the Super Show, one time when you were there with Notco, and you were just, your table, the Notco table, was just mobbed, and people wanted that stuff, and that's got to feel amazing to kind of get that response of, oh my, we want this stuff.
Yeah, when the show promoter yells at you because the crowd is too big and blocking the aisles, that makes you feel pretty good. It's hey, I'm sorry, but I'm pretty happy, but that's not my problem, I guess. But it feels good. It feels good. And to this day, it's only been a couple of years since Knock is wound down, but I get emails all the time. I wish I could buy this case, or I wish I could do that. Yeah.
Okay, so podcast. People are going to want to know how you and Mike Hurley of Relay FM, every week you guys record a podcast. The week that we're recording was episode 579, so it's been going for a while. The question that I'm guessing you get asked, because people ask me when I mention the Pen Addict, how do you find stuff to talk about every week? And are you really talking about pens?
We're really talking about pens every week. It's kind of become a joke that, we'll drop in every now and then. Is this a podcast about pens? We really did a podcast about pens for this long? I never run out of things to talk about. And when I started the podcast, when Mike actually had to twist my arm to make me do it. So the podcast is, 11 and a half years old. And Relay is only 9 years old, his current podcast network.
Right,
so Mike and I go way back to the pre-network podcast days. So we've been doing this for a long time. And initially when he finally twisted my arm, I was like, okay, I probably have about 10 episodes in me and we'll just go for it and do it. And I've never stopped talking about pens since. It is unbelievable, the community around stationery in general, and the feedback we get, the sharing, the communication that we get. So we've always found a way to have a great discussion. Sometimes it's just hey, these are the new products we find interesting, right? Sometimes it's me talking about reviews. Sometimes it's about how we use stuff. Yeah. And, you know, the struggles that people have with, hey, this is a commercial enterprise. You know, the pen industry is capitalistic, right? It's a stuff game. And so people, you know, are spending their money, and people will spend too much money. So we'll discuss like all the things that people, our listeners, care about when deciding to talk about stationery. Some people, like, I've gotten so much feedback. It's like, I don't even use pens or buy pens or go to this. I just like hearing you and Mike talk about this kind of a silly topic if you like really boil it down. So we have fun doing it. That's the most important thing is like, I always say this, another one of my catchphrases is, I can't not do this. Right. If I wasn't doing this, I would still be doing the same thing, right, with my pens. And now I just get to ask a lot more questions and think about the pens a lot more, or think about stationery and how people use them, and what's important to me in this whole realm.
So, as you said, maybe 5 years ago, you kind of added to your kind of career talking about pens with one other person by streaming on Twitch, currently usually 3 times a week. So that to me, like when people was like, what do you talk about with another person about pens? Like talking on Twitch, where it's basically, you know, you're talking to the chat.
Yeah. And it's live.
And it's live. First of all, how do you get into that, like mindset wise? How does a Twitch stream differ from a podcast recording? Are you aware also of needing to provide different content for those different platforms?
Yeah, so one of the things, when we were talking about all the things I do, one of the things I'm not is a YouTuber. So there is a really good video creation space in stationery because this is a very visual platform, right? And I started out writing. Like my platform was written, and then imagery, like with Instagram and the photography and the blog posts and things like that. And I've never been like a video creation guy, but I think video is super important for stationery for the reasons I started the blog in the first place. People want to see the product. How does it work? I can like disassemble something and show people. So I decided instead of making YouTube videos, I'm just going to go on Twitch, which I was already watching. Like, you know, I like watching video game content.
Yeah.
I was like, well, I like sharing things, and I like show and tell, right? This is a very show and tell subject. Yeah. Well, what better platform than if I can just turn it on live and people can ask me questions and then I can answer them. And then it just, like everything else I've done, I go in with no real plan for like, hey, I'm going to do this and we're going to make it a career and like this is going to be a core part of my portfolio. And it's like, you know what? Let's go see if people show up and want to talk about pens. And they did. And then they kept going and they did more. And then they kept showing up. So like, you know, I'll get, you know, on an average day, 150 viewers, live viewers for like an hour or two. And we just literally talk about pens. I, you know, have the camera set up so I can do a lot of show and tell. I'll do some handwriting. Like Twitch has been great for like testing inks, right? People want to see. Ink is a huge part of our stationery business. So people want to see, hey, what does this ink look like? Or I am in the fortunate position to get a lot of early access to things, right? So I can share these things like the first look or the unboxing. And I would rather just do that on Twitch in a live platform. Yes, I save those videos off to YouTube, but I don't create content. I haven't found that to be given everything else that I have, that's not the best use of my time to create video content. That's a lot of work. And I'm so impressed by all the stationary video creators out there because I look at that, I'm like, wow, I know how long that took you to make that. So I tend to just go live, and Twitch has been a good platform for that.
So the breakdown of your income, I'm not asking you to give numbers, but like how does the percentages, do you have a sense of like Pen Addict membership, Twitch, podcast, blog, like why does it all break down more or less?
So on my get to it eventually task list, I actually do want to have like not a dollar amount, but a percentage chart. So if I could think about this real quick, let me do the bulk stuff first that comprise the most of it. So podcast advertising, blog advertising, and blog membership is probably well over 50% of my income, probably more up towards 60 to 70% of my income. So over 50% for like that core, say, blog podcast, right? The original part of what I do. And the blog means advertising and memberships, and the podcast is advertising based, right? So I think those are probably, that's probably 50%. And then the rest of it is smatterings from 5% to 10, 15% chunks that just all kind of add up, between Spoke and Twitch. I mean, Twitch is super small. Like I probably make $500-$600 a month from Twitch a month, but I do it more because it's fun.
A ton of stuff. There are giveaways in every single stream.
Twitch is definitely an L in the column, but only in the dollar sense, not in the worthwhile sense and the fun sense. And I do have to keep that in mind when I do these things, because like it's just an important way to talk to people and share, and like people are teaching me things, right? That's another great thing about this community is like everyone wants to help everyone else. And like if I have a question about something, I guarantee if I don't know the answer, it would take me like 30 seconds to find someone who did. Like it's super cool that way.
I think of you as being like a journalist. You know a lot about a lot of things. And then there's some people who know like everything there is to know about like Pelican pens. But so that's their
I know the person to go ask the specific question. Yes.
So it's always interesting for me to notice the reaction when people realize you have interests beyond pens, because pens and stationery is such a big part of your life and such an area of expertise. And you're like, wait, you also like pickleball? Wait, you also are like a music head? Oh, you're really into sneakers or F1?
Yeah.
It's almost as if like when you're super into one thing, you can't have other interests. Like that's my impression anyway. Is that something does that really happen to you?
So the way I think about it is like, I'm just me, right? Like I represent myself as all of this. If you follow me, you get all of this. Like I don't have a curated Instagram feed. You're going to see my dog in there. You're going to see me and my wife. Well, you're going to see me and my wife winning a pickleball tournament, right? Like and you're going to see me, listening to some music and taking some screenshot of some like album cover that I think is cool looking or something like that. Like, and then when I write for members too, like I'll put personal content in that. Hey, this is the book I'm reading, or, this is the vacation we went on and that's the cool things that I did. Like I definitely believe I'm not an oversharer, but I am also not a person that could go through my day in a business sense in a highly curated fashion that is completely focused on what my Instagram feed looks like. That is not me. And I learned that a long time ago. So like that will actually like break me down if I have to be like too specific or too rule-based for what I can and can't talk about. I turn down lots of opportunities that have specific requirements for me to, okay, like if we do this deal, we need X posts and we need, got to have the reposts and the follows and all this stuff. I flat turn that stuff down because that's not something I want to do myself. So I'm certainly not going to ask people who put their faith in me to do on my behalf. So like, that's the way I think about it.
So that's not so much about like protecting your brand as much as like, I just don't want to do that.
Yeah, it really is. Like if I, I'm not going to lose my pen addict job tomorrow because I'm not going to fire myself. But like if I had to go back to a corporate world, like it would be pretty tough for me. Just the way I've been able to operate over the past few years, getting to make the calls that most people wouldn't make in the same situation, and being okay with that, being okay with trusting your gut, trusting yourself, trusting your mental health. Like I talk about mental health a lot in lots of different aspects and my struggles, with like anxiety and things like that. And I've learned over the past 10 or 15 years to be very protective of those things and don't represent something that I'm not, because I just wouldn't be able to sleep at night. Like I just wouldn't. So that's why I'm super happy to like talk about other things all the time. Like I'm not like a one track,
Pickleball is important, Brad. Let's not shortchange that.
There's a lot of hate out there, which I get that too. So, but no, pickleball has been really, really good to me. It's really upped my health level. So that's the best part. So
that's awesome. So I wonder, do you have any like stationary rules to live by?
I have two that I can come up with right off the top of my head. Number one is I don't post my fountain pens, and I'll explain what that means. So
You're a
June
monster.
June is aghast. So what posting a fountain pen is? So if you take any pen, right, any pen that's not a retractable pen, like a retractable pen has a click pen, any pen with a cap, I don't put the cap on the back of the pen. And the issue with fountain pens in particular is it overweights them to the back. It damages the barrel. There's all kinds of...
Does it make it, or does it balance them perfectly? I mean, some would say yes.
Some would say, like, I'm not on an island here, but there is a lot of pushback. There's a lot of pushback to that statement. But that is one of my personal rules. The other rule, which I didn't realize was such a big deal, and I've gotten a lot of pushback on this, is stickers on pens. So a lot of times when you buy a pen, there's a little barcode sticker on it, or a fountain pen could have a nib size sticker on them. Mm-hmm. Some people leave those on there, June. And I just can't stand for that.
Kind of monster,
I can't stand for that. So those are my two rules. Outside of that, I'm pretty like I'm not a pen monogamist. Like I use anything, everything. I have preferences, in other things like paper types and styles. But I mean, I'm not a big lined paper fan. But I use lined paper. So
see, neither. I was going to say, I never use lined paper, but I actually do.
Yeah.
Brad Dowdy, the Pen Addict, thank you so much for joining us today on Working.
I can't thank you enough for having me. Thank you so much, June. I appreciate it.
When we come back, June and I will talk about the mysterious art of block scheduling, the appeal of the perfect writing implement, and how to figure out what's the right medium for your message.
Apple Card is the perfect credit card for every purchase. It has cashback rewards unlike others. You earn unlimited daily cashback on every purchase, receive it daily, and can grow it at 4.15% annual percentage yield when you open a high-yield savings account. Apply for Apple Card in the Wallet app on iPhone and start earning and growing your daily cash with savings today. Apple Card subject to credit approval. Savings is available to Apple Card owners subject to eligibility requirements. Savings accounts provided by Goldman Sachs Bank USA. Member FDIC. Terms apply.
We made USAA insurance to help you save. Take advantage of discounts when you cover your home and your ride. Discover how we're helping members save at USAA.com/bundle. Restrictions apply.
All right, June. I like pens. I even have 2 fountain pens, but I am not a pen addict. You, of course, are. I think it's sort of a running gag on this show, your love of pen products and stationery. We, in fact, booked one of our guests, Nayland Blake, because they loved all your stationery stuff and they wanted to talk to you, and then they got stuck with me. What is the difference between a good pen and a great pen? Why would you be obsessed with pens? What about the specific pen makes them so special? And more importantly, because this is a show about the creative process, can the perfect pen improve your creativity?
So I get a kick out of trying out and using all kinds of different pens and papers and styles of notebook. And because I enjoy that process, it's fun for me to play around with writing. And, sometimes that's for work-based creativity, for working on the things that I get paid for doing. But often it's just fun doing creative journaling, art projects, just writing about my day. And I think there are lots of versions of this. Like in recent years, mechanical keyboards have had a similar boom. I mean, you don't need a special keyboard to use your computer. You certainly don't need more than one. But if you get a kick out of putting them together and playing with them and you can afford it, go mad, have fun. And having equipment you want to use will probably have you writing in your journal or typing into some sort of word processor. So in that limited sense, it is or can be a spur to creativity. But yeah, it's mostly just about playing with things that you like, I think. Difference between a good pen and a great pen? Well, sometimes it's about beautiful materials and a particularly pleasing writing experience. My favorite pen is also my most expensive pen. It's an Acaia, which is absolutely gorgeous and writes beautifully. But it's not the pen I use the most by any means. It also has a really juicy broad nib, so it doesn't really suit every kind of paper or every kind of situation. So obviously, you need to have a lot of different pens and inks and notebooks for all these different situations.
Amazing. You know, I have also been told that I have a juicy, broad nib that isn't right for every kind of situation, so I can relate. But enough about my nibs. Back to Brad. It's amazing. He does so many different things. I mean, look, if you break down any job into its workflow, obviously it's made up of lots of other little jobs. Yeah. But this guy really is doing like 17 different jobs, and each one of them involves, even if they're all about pens or stationery or whatever, switching gears, switching headspaces, which I find really hard to do, actually. You know, we have this podcast, writing a book, doing freelancing, whatever it is. That switching process is really difficult for me. So I am curious about this thing that you guys discussed called block scheduling, which I believe my reputation is that I am derisive about block scheduling, but actually I just have no frigging clue what block scheduling is. So can you enlighten me? Can you drop some science about block scheduling?
So I guess there are many different approaches to block scheduling. And I, first of all, need to say that this extreme version that I'm about to talk about is really only for independent creators who can set their own schedules. Our producer Cameron, he's got his shows he has to make every week. He doesn't get to, put in his blocks wherever he wants them. But one of the ways you can do this, which I think is probably like the typical one, is a version of the ideal week that we've talked about in previous episodes, where rather than starting with the things you need to do, you start out with when you want to do stuff. Like if you do your best thinking between 9 and 11 in the morning, you block those hours for writing or filming videos or designing your next product release, whatever is most demanding in a way. And if you are your most social in the middle of the day, maybe schedule your meetings or the slots when you make yourself available for consultation. Put them then. If you have a little bit of gas left in the tank at 3 o'clock, but you are most definitely not at your peak, block off 3 to 4 for shipping or admin. So that's the basic idea. I think Brad's approach was slightly different and a bit more task focused. His big blocks are his regular commitments that involve other people. His podcast taping happens on Wednesday mornings. His Twitch stream happens at X o'clock on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. He writes his blog posts or does his Pen Addict blog stuff in another block. And then once those big blocks are in place, he looks at what other tasks he has to do that week and fits them into the gaps between those big rocks, if you like. And I have to say, since I left my day job at Slate and became an independent creator, which is not really a label that I usually apply to myself, but is, I think, accurate. This is something I've struggled with. When I was the senior managing producer of Slate Podcast, my schedule was very crowded and I had lots of deliverables and meetings. But that busy schedule also provided a kind of clarity. I rarely had to think about when I could get things done because I could see where I had an opening in my schedule. As a freelancer or someone working in their own time, you tend to have looser deliverables. Mm-hmm. And that kind of freedom or openness can be overwhelming. When you can do things anytime, it's often hard to get them done at all, unless, Isaac, you put them on your schedule.
Yeah, I really feel you about that, because then you can always just put stuff off, the things you don't want to do or the boring work or whatever.
What are the consequences?
Exactly. And the consequences are suddenly you're like, wait, I was supposed to get on a plane next week and I haven't booked plane tickets or taxes are due or whatever it is.
Yeah. Or, I forgot to write my book. Yeah.
Another thing that really struck me is how many different media Brad's working in, and even within those media, how many different forms what we would call work might take. Like a given project might be right for a Twitch stream or a YouTube video or a blog post or a podcast or something else. You and I, we mostly work in books and podcasts, and then we do a little bit of other freelance writing. But we've both done other things too. You do these beautiful collages and these sort of bespoke books. I used to work in theater, et cetera, and so forth. How do you know what the right medium is for an idea you have? And is there any lessons that we or the listeners can really take from Brad on that, since he seems to be very good at figuring that out?
Yeah, this is something I think Brad does really well. He is laser focused on stationery, but he always provides a bit of differentiation depending on the medium. So again, it's a lot of overlap in the content that he's blogging, podcasting, streaming, writing newsletters about. But it never looks or sounds quite the same. The blog is mostly classic reviews. This product now exists. What's good about it? What's not so great? and the podcast and the Twitch streams are more of a discussion of the latest stationery news. What new pens and notebooks have been released? What are the stationery people freaking out about? And what do Brad and Mike think about those products and freakouts? And it is really remarkable. Quite often, I will have watched Brad streaming on Twitch for several hours in a week, but when I listen to the latest podcast, I don't think I've ever thought, oh yeah, I've already heard this. Because it's different in every iteration. You know, they're all different. And it's different from most independent creators. In most circumstances, when people repurpose their core content, the smart approach is to make different versions of exactly the same material. You write the blog post, you turn the photos you took for the blog post into Instagram content. You make a YouTube video that uses the blog post as a script. And for most people, that's smart because most people have a blog audience and a YouTube audience that are quite separate. And as journalists, I suspect that you and I are getting a bit itchy about self-plagiarism when I sort of sketch this model out. But
oh yeah, definitely.
If you are trying to make a living as an independent content creator, I think straight repurposing is what most people should do.
Yeah, I'll admit the idea of straight repurposing kind of gives me hives. The idea that you would like take this content and then make, you know, there's a sort of version of that, which is, of course, when you have a book coming out, you either serialize part of it or you write these kind of derivative essays that repurpose your research in other ways. But the idea of taking like an actual thing you have made and then just that's now a YouTube video or whatever, that's a difficult thing for me to accept, to be completely honest.
No, absolutely. And yet, okay, so let me give a little story from my past. I first experienced this different audience thing back in 2005 when I made a Slate podcast that was just me reading that day's explainer column. I really didn't have any creative input. I was just reading someone else's work out loud, editing it and uploading it. And I got so much positive feedback about that work, more than I got about my writing, which was honestly really annoying, because it was still very early in the podcast cycle and people were super excited to be able to listen to Slate content when they were away from their computers. It didn't matter one bit to them that it was just an audio version of a Slate story because they didn't have time to read the story out. That's how it felt to them anyway. So I think, yeah, I think rightly feel just that it is plagiarism, it's self-plagiarism.
Right.
But if people have not read the blog post, they don't know you've done that. You are, in a way, you're doing the equivalent of tweeting out your story, right?
Right. Or it's like in the summer, one summer, NBC adopted the tagline, "It's new to you" for their reruns.
That's right.
It's like if you haven't seen that Seinfeld episode, it's new to you,
and it's true.
Well, we hope you've enjoyed the show. If you have, please remember to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Then you will never miss an episode. Also, little reminder here that if you join Slate Plus, you get ad-free podcasts, extra segments on shows like Slow Burn and Big Mood, Little Mood, and you'll never hit a paywall on the Slate site. To learn more, go to slate.com/workingplus.
Thank you to Brad Dowdy and to our producer, Cameron Drews, who is living proof that it's the brain, not the pen. Cameron manages to do amazing work using those cheap grey ball pens that you buy in bulk from the big box store. We'll be back next week with Nate's conversation with graphic novelist and musician Dave Chisholm. Until then, get back to work.
Hey everybody, it's Tim Heidecker. You know me, Tim and Eric, Bridesmaids, and Fantastic Four. I'd like to personally invite you to listen to Office Hours Live with me and my co-hosts, DJ Doug Pound.
Hello.
And Vic Berger.
Howdy.
Every week we bring you laughs, fun, games, and lots of other surprises. It's live. We take your Zoom calls.
Music.
We love having fun. Excuse me?
Songs. Vic said something. Music.
Songs.
Music.
I like having fun. I like to laugh. I like to meet people who can make me laugh. Please subscribe now.